Welcome to Sounds of Resistance YouTube channel. The successive victories of the Ukrainian forces began to frighten the Russian army. The Russian army, which has not been able to gain victory of any front since the beginning of the occupation, is now very close to giving up. The number of casualties in this invasion, initiated by the Russian forces under the leadership of Putin, reached hundreds of thousands. The defense of the Ukrainian army is getting stronger every day. Desperate in the face of the strong Ukrainian defense, the Russian soldiers had no choice but to retreat. The Russian army, which could not achieve any success in the last 10 months, lost in faith in this occupation. The tanks and the helicopters of the Russian Ministry of Defense, which it trusted very much, were destroyed by the Ukrainian army. The Russian army, which lost all its military ammunition in the fight with Ukraine, has very little ammunition left. In many news in the Russian media, it was mentioned that the soldiers lost their faith and trust in Putin. The Russian people, who do not want to suffer any more losses because of the bad strategy, want their soldiers to return. Russians are fleeing Ukrainian convoys. Russian leader Putin has tested the worst defeat in Ukraine, with the Russian army reportedly losing 80% of its marines around Kharkov after being attacked by lightning. Kherson, one of the first cities captured by Russia after its attacks on Ukraine. After his withdrawal last week, he had no success left. Announcing a counterattack in Kherson in the south at the end of August, the Ukrainian army made a surprise move a few days later and caught the Russian invaders by surprise in the east. In the attacks, which resembled a lightning war, an area of 3,000 square kilometers was liberated from the Russian invaders in a few days. After Russia's announcement of withdrawal from Kherson, Ukraine announced that it has regained some areas. Ukrainian army recaptured the southern city captured by Russia. After announcing that he would withdraw from Kherson, he noted that they have made significant gains around the city in the last days. Ukrainian troops reportedly recaptured the important town of Sinihurivka, 50 kilometers north of Kherson. Kyiv also claimed to have made advances up to 7 kilometers on two fronts near Kherson. Russia says it has started to leave the city, its biggest gain in the occupation, but the process could take weeks. While Wednesday's announcement of the withdrawal from the Russian army is seen as a major setback for Moscow, Ukrainian officials are skeptical of the maneuver and warn it could be a trap. There is no evidence of a mass withdrawal of Russia from Kherson. Valery Zaluzhny, the commander of the Ukrainian army, said on Thursday that he was not in a position to confirm or deny the withdrawal, but that his own forces had made significant progress. General Zaluzhny noted that his troops took control of 12 settlements on the western bank of the Dnieper River, advancing on two fronts in an area that also includes Kherson. He said 7 kilometers of ground gain had been achieved since yesterday as the troops advanced along the northeast axis and west axis. Video footage confirmed by Reuters agency shows the soldiers entering the town of Sinihurivka and being greeted by the public in the square. Sinihurivka is located at an important road junction and is also a rail transport hub for the Mykolaiv region bordering Kherson. Another military official on Thursday said in a video message that the Russian-occupied part of the Mykolaiv region has been completely cleared of Russian soldiers. In the post made by the regional administration, no statement confirming the situation was used, but it was stated that there is a lot of good news today, and that the aid will be distributed and the houses will be given electricity again. The BBC has not been able to independently verify recent territorial gains and losses. But in recent weeks, news of the steady progress of the Ukrainian army has been on the agenda. Kherson became the first and only regional capital to be captured after Russia began invading Ukraine on February 24th. Since the end of September, after referendums in the occupied areas of Ukraine that were not recognized by the international community, the Kremlin considered these areas Russian territory. On Wednesday, Moscow announced that it would withdraw from the west bank of the Dnieper River, which divides Ukraine in two. Russian President Vladimir Putin did not attend the televised statement. Ukrainian General Zaluzhny said that Russia, whose supply lines have been destroyed and command systems deteriorated, has no choice but to leave. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg emphasized that it is clear that Russia is under heavy pressure, but that it is important to see how the situation on the ground develops. British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace said Russia was building a defense line with create blocks on the other side of the Dnieper River. Regarding the withdrawal, Wallace said The world should not be grateful for Russia returning stolen property. The Ukrainian presidential advisor said it was too early to celebrate. He said Russia wanted to leave Kherson in mines and turn it into a city of death with a plan to bombard it from afar. It is evaluated that the situation may cause an increase in the number of casualties in the war. General Mike Milley, the chief of the staff of the United States, announced that they estimated that around 100,000 Russians and 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers were killed or wounded in the war in Ukraine, and that about 40,000 civilians lost their lives. General Surovikin announced that the decision in a pre-designed video meeting with senior commanders. Under these circumstances, the most sensible operation is to organize a defensive line across the Dnieper River, says Surovikin, in footage broadcast on Russian state television. Putin was not present at the meeting with Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. The announcement came after Russian media reported that Kirill Stremisov, Kherson's appointed deputy director of Russia, died in a car accident. Stremisov, seen as one of the main supporters of the invasion of Kherson, said just 6 days ago the most likely Russian forces would be forced to withdraw to the eastern bank of the Dnieper. Although the Ukrainian counterattack has slowed in recent weeks, the supply of forces in the city has been difficult as several bridges over the Dnieper River have been hit by Ukrainian missiles. Before withdrawing, Russia had evacuated thousands of civilians from the city by boat, and Ukraine had condemned what it described as forced expulsions. Kherson was one of the 4 settlements annexed by Russia after a referendum that Kyiv did not recognize. Ukrainian authorities, on the other hand, are cautious about the withdrawal announcement. Country's leader Volodymyr Zelensky said in his daily address to the nation that Kyiv was acting very carefully. Zelensky said, "The enemy does not give us gifts. He does not show goodwill. We have to win ourselves," he said, and noted that they acted by taking the minimum risk. The testimonies obtained by the BBC from within the city vary. While some report that there are fewer soldiers, it is reported that there is a military buildup along the Dnieper River. Kyiv is cautious about the withdrawal announcement. Announcing the decision to withdraw, General Sergei Surovikin, the commander of the Russian forces in Ukraine, stated that it is no longer possible to keep the supply lines to the city. In this way, all Russian forces on the west bank of the Dnieper River will be withdrawn. Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov said that the success achieved in counteroffensive signaled that Russia could be defeated. Speaking to the Financial Times, Reznikov noted that 3,000 square kilometer area that was recaptured was even better than they expected. He likened the Ukrainian army's raid to a snowball rolling down the hill and announced that the Russian invaders had suffered the worst defeat since February 24th. Nobody can understand why Putin still insists on occupation after these great defeats. All Russia agreed that, after the defeats he suffered, Putin was not thinking well. Thanks for watching us.